We got a call from a residential real estate broker a couple weeks ago, and she was representing a buyer. The buyer was in escrow on a $2 million plus custom home up in Folsom. It's a little suburb of Sacramento. And the broker had become concerned. She saw something in the title report about a ditch easement, and she didn't see any ditches on the property, and so she was wise enough to understand that might be an issue, and so she called me and said, hey, can you look at this title report for me? I think I might need to locate this easement. Can you take a look? Let me know what you think. So we said, sure, shoot over the title report, and we'll take a quick look at the property. So what did we find? We found a giant mess. So I want to tell you a little bit about what we found, and then we can talk about some of the lessons in this story. So in the title report, there were actually 4 different ditch and pipeline easements, all water. And the issue was there were no physical ditches on the property. So that's a problem, right? What that probably means is those ditches have been abandoned. They were no longer used. They'd been abandoned from a physical sense, an operational perspective, but they were still encumbering the property. So the easements hadn't been abandoned or quitclaimed. And that one of the reasons that was an issue is it was kind of cool. I've never seen this before, but actually when I looked at the property on Google Maps, you could actually see the name of one of the ditches. It had a name. I forget what the name was. It's like Rose Ditch or something. It was that you could actually see it on Google Maps. Then where they had the name where the old ditch was, the ditch was labeled in a couple different spots. And one of the issues was the ditch ran through the $2 million custom home. So that was a problem that needed to get cleaned up. But there were other major issues we found when we started looking into this particular piece of property that were even more important than the issue with the easements that needed to be cleaned up. So the vesting deed for the parcel, the land description in that deed was really ugly. It was one of the worst deeds I'd ever seen. It would be very hard to put on the ground. So it was 3 or 4 pages long, and it was just a mess. I put together a rough ballpark estimate. It probably cost us $20,000 to $25,000 to get this parcel of land described in the deed on the ground, just the way the deed was written. The parcel had never been surveyed before. The property corner monuments weren't marked. They'd never been set. And this was a kind of a skinny, odd-shaped parcel. It was like this leftover piece of land, kind of I don't know if you'd call it a no man's land piece of property, but it was a really funky property that was kind of just whatever was left over after all the other property had been subdivided and developed. It was kind of squished up against the county boundary. So it was an ugly boundary survey. And the most important problem that we found, we got to looking at some satellite photography and some GIS level parcel boundaries, and we realized that this custom home, this $2 million custom home that had been built, encroached somewhere between 10 and 20 feet into the neighboring parcel. And the neighboring parcel was a 60 or 100 foot wide strip of land that was owned by the local water district. And this custom home, you could clearly see was built way over the line, right? So it wasn't even close. I knew there was an encroachment there. I didn't know exactly how big the building encroachment was, but I knew it was there, and I knew it was large. And so we called the broker, of course, right away, and we said, hey, we think there's some major problems here. Don't let your buyer close escrow until we look into this and get it sorted out. And we gave her what we call a boundary and land title quick check so she could provide that information to her client and to the seller's agent. And so I started poking around just a little bit to kind of see if I could understand what had happened. And just to the east of this parcel with the custom home was a large, not large, but it was a medium-sized local reservoir, so a water storage site with a dam. And we were able to figure out that these 3 or 4 ditch easements that were listed in the title report were the old ditches that carried water out of the dam, probably for irrigation. And it looked to us, just from what we were able to gather, the evidence we were able to gather, that at some point those ditches had been eliminated and they underground. They put the water supply that came out of the bottom of the reservoir underground. And so this adjacent parcel, this right-of-way strip that was adjacent to the subject parcel, had a large diameter water supply pipe underground. When I say large diameter, I mean feet. We don't know exactly how big it was, but it was big. It was feet. It was 4 feet or 6 feet. And that was the right-of-way that this home had been built on top of. So some major problems there. This is not an inexpensive home. This is a very expensive, 6 or 7 bedroom custom home with a 4-car garage and like a movie theater. It's like, it was very expensive. So how did that happen? How did we end up with this house that was built clearly over the property line, and it was an expensive house, and this is fairly new construction. This had been done, I think, in the last 10 or 15 years. So how does that happen? We find problems with building encroachments occasionally, but they're not usually this bad. This was pretty egregious. What was interesting in doing the research for the parcel, we found out that a surveyor from a fairly well-known local surveying and engineering company in Sacramento had come in about 2000, mid-2000s, late, 2010 at the latest, somewhere in that time range. And they had done what we call certificate of compliance. And what a certificate of compliance is in California is just basically a way to get the local government agency to recognize that you have a legal parcel, usually so you can build something on it. And so it looked to me like somebody had bought this parcel in the 2000s. It was kind of a funky parcel. There was already some title problems. And so they hired this other engineering firm to come in and do a certificate of compliance so that they could get a building permit. And it looked to me like these guys didn't actually do a survey. They just kind of put together a legal description just based off the record, which you can do. Surveyors can do that. It's usually a bad idea, but that's what they did. And they got these people their certificate of compliance, and nobody ever got a survey. That's what it looked like. So the company that did the certificate of compliance didn't do a survey. Then I guarantee you there was an architect involved in the design of this custom home. So there was an architect that built a custom home, probably, designed a custom home, probably prepared a site plan. The architect did that without the benefit of a boundary survey. And then for whatever reason, the county, in this case, not only granted a building permit, but also did building inspections and never asked to verify that the building met the setback requirements, the custom home. So it's one of those situations where we have multiple points of failure here, right? The surveyor didn't do their job. The surveyor that did the certificate of compliance. The architect didn't do their job. And the county didn't do their job as the land use regulator. Everybody failed, and now we've got a $2 million custom home well over our property line and on top of a giant water pipeline. So what was the end result? So the broker got a hold of me. She was very upset. She's like, I don't understand. How could this happen? What do I do? She said, my buyer's in escrow. We close in a couple weeks. I said, you need to get a hold of a good land attorney. I said, do you know one? She said, no. We referred her to a land attorney that we work with on a regular basis. I said, hey, bottom line is your client can't buy this parcel and without some major work. I said, look, all these issues are probably solvable in one way or another. But, you're going to have to get lawyered up if you want to fix this. You got to, talk to the water district, see what you can do. And so she went ahead and talked to her attorney. Now, I don't know what happened. I haven't heard anything from the attorney, so I'm guessing that the buyer probably walked away from this escrow. And, it's possible they lost a deposit. I don't know. So what's going to happen next? Probably what will happen next is this home will get sold to a buyer that is either ignorant or whose real estate agent is ignorant. This particular real estate, she was smart enough to ask the question about the easement. A lot of real estate agents wouldn't ask. A lot of real estate agents don't even look at the title report. She was smart enough to do that, and I commend her for that. But there's a good chance this parcel will get sold with the home over the property line. And it won't be an issue for years, probably. So when will it be? When will it become an issue? Well, it'll become an issue when the water district needs to do something with that pipe, and then they're going to need to replace that pipe or to repair that pipe, and they're going to go to do that, and they're going to find this $2 million custom home has been built on top of their parcel, on top of their right of way. So, what are the lessons? You know, if you're in the market for expensive real estate in California, what are the lessons from this story? Well, here's the first one: hire a good broker. You know, I'm oftentimes disappointed in the lack of due diligence that real estate brokers and their agents do. This was an exception to that rule. In this particular case, the buyer was represented by a good agent, good broker, and she asked the right questions and uncovered a problem that would have been a major issue for her buyer, her client, and I commend her for that. She did an excellent job. So work with a good broker, you know, work with a good broker that's willing to look out for your interest as a buyer. Ask questions. You know, if you're not sure about something, don't be bashful or embarrassed. You need to ask, right? This is buyer beware. This is you're making a major purchase decision here, major investment. You need to ask questions. Don't be afraid to do that. And if you don't know what questions to ask, you need to hire somebody that can ask those questions for you. And then finally, the last lesson is, you know, get a survey, right? So here's a parcel. Yeah, I suspect the reason it never got surveyed is because it would be expensive to locate the boundaries of this parcel on the ground. Yeah, it's going to be a $20,000 to $30,000 effort at least, and nobody wanted to spend that money. But somebody's going to spend it at some point in the future, and now there's a $2 million custom home over the property line. So, you know, get a survey, right? If you're an architect, get a survey before you do your design. If you're building your dream home, your $2 million custom dream home in the foothills of the Sierra Nevada of California, get a survey. You know, if you're going to buy that $2 million dream home, get a survey. You know, we don't see this kind of thing all the time, but you'd be surprised at how often it comes up, right? So we got a very expensive home here that's built well across the property line into the neighbor's land, and that's a huge issue. So if you want to avoid that, you got to pay for a good survey.